Welcome to VCE Psychology. This video will tell you very briefly about some of the main topics and concepts that you'll study in Year 11 and 12 Psych and give you some ideas of possible career paths that Psych may lead to beyond Year 12 and beyond even studying it at university. So let's start with Year 11, Unit 1, which is the first semester of Year 11. You'll look at how our brain functions. So you'll look at different parts of the brain and what the different roles are for each hemisphere or each lobe inside the brain. You'll learn why it's better to learn a second language when you're a really young child and why it's so much harder to learn a new language when you're an adult. You'll look at what happens if we damage or remove different parts of the brain. Then we move on to psychological development, that old debate about nature versus nurture, whether we are who we are because of our genetics or because of the environment that we were brought up in. What happens if you have two identical twins and you separate them at birth? Do they grow up with the same personality or are they different? We look at what normal behaviour means. So what it means to be, I guess, normal or the same as everybody else in a society. Then we'll look a bit at mental illness. Things like schizophrenia that we've seen so much in maybe movies and TV shows, but we look at it from more of a psychological point of view. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, same thing. Ones that sometimes get glorified in TV and movies, but we look at what it really is like to live with these compulsions, people that need to flick the light switch off and on all the time. Over to Unit 2, we look at perception. So we look at what influences the way we see the world. Optical illusions is a big one here. So you'll look at something like this one here. These images, or this image here, nothing is moving, it's totally still. But when we all look at this image, we think that these little pictures are moving up and forward or up and down. Why is that? And we study that in a bit of detail. Then we'll look at what influences the way people behave. So why you behave differently in a group compared to when you're alone. Why you behave different with your friends compared to when you're with your family. We look a bit at stereotypes. So if I said to you, picture a scientist, you probably all think of something like this. And that's the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of us when we talk about a scientist. The glasses, the crazy hair, lab coat, test tubes, when in reality it's probably quite far from what a scientist or most scientists do in real life. We look at advertising and what influences us to buy certain products based on what we see. Over to Year 12. Year 12 begins by looking at the nervous system. So if I were to put up, I'm sure you've all seen an image that comes up like this and is followed by a loud scream, we all react the same way. So you all get a fright. And when you get a fright, all of our bodies do the same thing. Our heart rate increases, our breathing rate increases. Why is that? We look at all the reasons that this happens to prepare our body for danger. Then we'll look at learning and memory. So over time, we find better ways to improve our memory. We work out what helps us to learn new information, and that's what this course explores in more detail as well. Have a look at these questions. Pause at any time if you wanted to see anything in a bit more detail, but have a look at these questions on the screen and how many of these questions do you know the answer to? And why do you not know the answer to some of these questions? This is what else you'll look at as part of the course. Why you can't tell me who finished 14th on the AFL ladder in 2017. Is it because you forgot, or is it because you never learnt that information in the first place? In Unit 4, if we move on, at levels of consciousness, we look at sleep in great detail, which is really, really useful for a teenager especially, who usually don't get enough sleep. We look at ways to improve our sleep. We look at how many hours of sleep we should be getting at different ages. We look at how alcohol can affect our driving ability. Then as we move down to Unit 4, we look at mental health, mental well-being, particularly with a focus on phobias, how people develop phobias, how to treat a phobia. And finally, beyond Year 12, there are many, many jobs that psychology can lead to, many career paths, either directly or indirectly related to psych. So having a look at, there's some examples on the screen there, but they can all be expanded much further. If you're looking at working in sort of community services or counselling, there's things like social work, drug and alcohol rehabilitation, youth work, child protection, working with families or people with trauma as well, careers psychologists even. In the business world, a lot of marketing and market research use psychology in their work. Public relations, human resource management as well. Psychology is a big focus and big advantage in any of those fields. In education, most schools have psychologists and work very closely with children in that field too. Beyond that, in the health field, nurses, occupational therapy, rehabilitation counselling, they all use psychology in their fields of work as well. Forensic psychology is also a very interesting one. Courts and police work very closely with psychologists. Mental health of possible criminals is analysed in detail too. So if you want to know anything more about the subject, the course, psychology as a career, here are all the teachers that are currently teaching psychology at Doncaster. Feel free to come and ask them for any advice or anything else that you need to know. Thank you.